Hi there. In recent videos and posts, I've talked about various strategies that involve monitoring the markets before the event starts, and sometimes monitoring that market for quite a length of time. So this may be an apt time to talk about the two different connection options you have that allow Fairbot to talk to Betfair. Now, much of what I'm going to discuss here will apply to all trading software because the facilities that I'm going to talk about are provided by Betfair. It's not a Fairbot only thing. But obviously here the focus will be on Fairbot. So if you go up to the tools options, you get this dialog box, you'll see you have two API connection options available to you. Now I, generally speaking, use the Stream API. Now the Stream API is like any other streaming service like Spotify or indeed the YouTube video that you're watching just now. Your client software that you use on whatever device you're using, whenever you open up that stream, asks for that stream to be sent to you in real time, and your device will start playing that stream immediately rather than waiting for the whole stream to be downloaded as one separate file and then start playing it. Now, in regard to Fairbot and Betfair, the streaming connection mechanism has less latency, there's less overhead involved. There's less communication and signals needing to be sent by Fairbot to keep that data up to date. Fairbot is simply playing the equivalent of a YouTube video, if you like, and it keeps updating that data as that new data is sent in real time. There's one thing to note about the Stream API is that it is non-configurable. If you're using the Stream API, you get the amount of data that Betfair decides to send you. You can't configure it, you can't ask for more data, less data, change the frequency of that data, and so on and so forth. And to go into to have a look at that, it may be worthwhile if I come out of that and go to the statistics box. So you'll see here two graphs, the API NG and the Stream API. So with this market open at Lingfield at the moment, this is a representation of the amount of data that's coming in for that stream. Now that stream will keep on playing until either the market closes or you physically close the market. So if I switch to a different market, you'll still see more data coming in, but of course that data is for this market here. So if I actually pop this market into a separate window, which then allows me to close the market completely, when I shut that down, you'll see there's no streaming data coming in. Okay, now let me just pull this market back up again. If I add this to the watch list, which is something that many of you will do if you've created automated strategies and you apply that to a number of markets. If we open up the watch list, you'll see that the market is listed there. If I close this window again, you'll see the data is still coming in because it's sitting in the watch list. And it's not until I remove it from the watch list that effectively closes the market then. So if I was to add in, let's get that out of the way, if I was to add in a number of markets, let me just choose a few here, add them into the watch list, and you'll see that when we pull up the watch list, we've got all these markets, and all of those are being streamed at the same time. Now that's one of the things that you may find with the streaming option. If you have loads of markets in here, say for example you set up a strategy that is in effect on all the racing for a day, and you do that in the morning, you go off to the golf course for the afternoon. This will carry on doing that, and once each of these is closed at the end of the race, the streams for all the other ones will still carry on. And it's not until all of those markets are closed or removed from the watch list that you will find that that stream effectively stops. So effectively, you're looking at multiple videos, if you like, if I can use that analogy. But you have no control over it. And that's one of the things that I have noticed using the stream. If you have loads and loads of markets in here, and it may be a function of me using Fairbot on Linux and a function of the power of my laptop, but what I sometimes find is that the latter races tend to get a little bit sluggish. And if that's the case, you may find yourself having to manually removing things from the watch list. And in extreme cases, you may find yourself actually having to log out and log back in again. But as I say, I'm not sure if that's a function of me using Fairbot on Linux. And certainly, if I had a more powerful laptop, that would be alleviated a little bit. But the important thing with the streaming service is that you have no ability to configure anything. You set up the stream simply by opening up a market, and that stream is sent to you directly by Betfair, and you have no way of controlling the frequency or the amount of data that you receive. Okay, let me just remove those from there. And we'll see once again that the stream data will effectively switch off, except for this one stream that I've got here. So you see the amount of data fell quite a bit there. And again, obviously, if I close this, the streams are all finished now. Now, the other connection option is the API NG, standing for Next Generation. So it has nothing to do with Star Trek. It's when Betfair changed their API. I think it was about 8 years ago, I think now. And they called it API NG. We can switch to that by going up to the Tools option. And while I'm here, before I actually click on that, just take a note of this refresh time option, which is dimmed out. If I click on Tools and then Options, choose the API NG, you'll see that I need to log in again. So let me just do that. Okay, I'm logged back in, and you'll see that the refresh time option is now enabled, and I can change this. So this actually tells Fairbot how frequently to connect to Betfair and ask for data. And this is the main difference between the streaming and the next generation mechanisms. With the next generation API, Fairbot specifically goes in and says, Betfair, send me this data. And it keeps on doing that based on whatever refresh time you have set here. And clearly there's an additional overhead involved in that compared to the streaming option. That's why there tends to be a little less latency within the streaming option. But this mechanism here, the next generation mechanism, allows you to specify the frequency of that data. For example, if you are monitoring a slow moving market, you don't need to have a refresh time set to 0.2 seconds. You can increase that. So for example, a football match pre-kickoff moves relatively slowly, and you don't need to refresh the market every 0.2 of a second. You might set that to 5 seconds or even 10 seconds. If we just open up a market again, if I switch back to my markets and go back to the Lingfield match, race I should say, the same sort of thing, but if I pull up the statistics window again, you'll see that we've only got the API Next Gen option available to us there. And you'll see there how quickly that's coming in. There's data coming in based on a frequency specified here. So if I change that to 5 seconds, you'll see that that rate slows down. And every 5 seconds, you'll get a little pulse coming in as Fairbot quickly contacts Betfair for some more data regarding this market. So you can use this as a mechanism to determine how quickly Fairbot pulls in the data from Betfair. So a slow moving market, you can afford to increase this into the tens of seconds, if you will, rather than having it at a fraction of a second. So if I just reduce that again, we'll put it back to 0.2, and you'll see it automatically starts speeding up again. So certainly for pre-race stuff just before the race, and certainly for in-play, you would want that set to a fairly small figure. Now if we add that to the watch market, same thing again as you saw in the streaming option, closing this window, you'll see, hang on a minute, Alistair, all the data's stopped. And that's because within the watch list, you now have these two controls here. So unlike the streaming facility, where once it's added to the watch list, so for example, if you set up first thing in the morning, that will be streaming all day. Whereas if you use the API Next Gen option, you have the facility to specify, okay, start pulling in the data a certain time before the event starts. And the settings that you specify here and the stop refreshing market option when you specify it in here applies to all the markets that you may have listed in the watch list. So you see there's nothing happening. Fairbot's not contacting Betfair at the moment simply because this market doesn't start until 12:05 and it is currently 10 to 12 and it's configured for 2 minutes. If I change that to, let's say, half an hour, there's the data coming in. So if you are frequently setting up strategies and adding them to the watch list, and you're setting those up in the morning with a view to just leaving your computer to get on with it, you may want to consider setting this mechanism up and using the API Next Generation. That will cut some of the overhead and some of the load on your computer if you've got lots of markets here. The setting that you specify here is obviously dependent on what your strategy is doing. For example, the pre-race steamer thing that I was doing the other week, that video, we're looking at a window 10 minutes before the start of the race. So you might want to set that to 20 minutes, for example, to start pulling in that data. So it's dependent on the strategies that you are involved in and have listed and assigned in here to what settings that you specify there. But that's perhaps the main difference between streaming and using the Next Generation option. You've got finer control available to you via the Next Generation API compared to streaming, but with streaming there's less overhead at the client end, at the Fairbot end. But you can mitigate that somewhat by changing your refresh times and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Keep those in mind, and it's obviously completely dependent on the type of strategies that you're using. Okay, guys, thank you.